They're the fastest ships in Star Wars. So fast, in fact. They outpace TIE interceptors and vanish into hyperspace without a carrier. The RZ-1 A-Wing was built for hit-and-run missions, surgical strikes, and desperate escapes. However, its real-world story is just as wild as what we've seen on screen. Let's talk about why this little arrowhead deserves more love. What's up, plastic addicts? Welcome to Jason's Space Talk, where sci-fi kits come to life, skills are sharpened, and every mistake is a lesson. Thanks to the random availability of Bandai kits in Canada, I've been scooping up these Star Wars kits whenever I see one. Having built the MPC X-Wing and B-Wing, the TIE Advanced, and AMT Studio Series TIE Fighter, the Bandai A-Wing felt like a good next step. I already knew Bandai's reputation for flawless fit and finish, but I had no idea just how good they were until I slowed down and treated this particular build with much more care. It was a joy to build, and the addition of lighting was relatively easy, and the weathering really sets it off. The A-Wing was one of 2 Rebel fighters designed for Return of the Jedi. It was the first one built, hence the A, and the model was designed by Joe Johnson, who also helped shape the look of the Millennium Falcon and Boba Fett. Despite being fast and sleek, the A-Wing got sidelined for years because no major character ever flew one, but it gained cult status in the 90s thanks to Star Wars video games. And now, it's a fan favorite for anyone who loves speed and subtle design. So today, I'm giving this underrated starfighter the attention it deserves, with lighting, weathering, and a few upgrades that make Bandai's already impressive kit even better. One of the things I really like about Bandai is the box art, especially the sides, because it shows a built-up model in detail, so you could use that as your reference if you don't have studio photos. It all depends on how you want to build your model. Also, the volume of plastic in the box for a small 172 model kit is fantastic. This is full, and all the castings are good. There's no flash, which is to be expected for something this new. As we've discussed before, it does come in molded plastic because you can build this out of the box and not paint it. You could just build it and display it as is. You could add weathering, whatnot. Point is that this is very much for beginner and advanced because there's so much detail. I did so much. I recorded 7 hours of footage to build this model kit. It was much more in-depth and enjoyable than I had anticipated, which means I'm definitely looking forward to more of the Bandai kits. I also like that the instructions are very, very, very detailed. So when deciding to pick up a Bandai kit, keep in mind that it could be a very quick and simple out-of-the-box build and just put on a shelf. Or you can take it to the next level, modify it, add lighting, weathering, and really go deep. I was very, very impressed with this. Being 172, obviously, things are fairly small, including the cockpit, but they did something I like. They made it multi-piece, so depending on the level of detail you want to provide, it can be fairly easy to get a lot packed in there. The instructions call for black. After watching other people's videos, I opted for NATO black, because it has a bit of gray tone in it. This is something I could have airbrushed when completed, but sometimes I just like to get the regular brush out and do it by hand. I'm not particularly good at dry brushing because I haven't really done it before. This is the first time I'm taking it a bit more seriously. I started with silver. Wasn't really happy with the results, primarily because I didn't get most of the paint off and I didn't go light enough. I did switch over to a light gray and continue. It kind of had the opposite effect, once again, because I think I was pressing too hard, in that it kind of got to the recessed areas and not the raised areas. But it did achieve an effect where detail was brought out. For the second pass, I also disassembled the cockpit and then reassemble it once done, which I like about Bandai. The pressure fit is great. It's not snap fit. You can disassemble and reassemble as necessary. Of all the things in modeling I hate, it's probably figures the most. Maybe even more so than sand prime check, sand prime repeat. I opted to do it on this one because with the Death Star base panel, it felt like it would not be fitting if I didn't do the pilot. Luckily, it was small enough that I was able to get it painted reasonably well, apply a wash to bring out some detail, so that when you pop this guy into the cockpit, it's a reasonable representation of a pilot. And once the canopy is snapped into place, which is a little bit difficult, it looks alright. The lower fuselage is pretty straightforward. It's primarily these rear bulkhead inserts, which have specific slots, pay very close attention, and the primary gun mounts. The upper fuselage just snaps into place, but can be tricky getting the alignment. However, this isn't the final install. I am just doing this for test fitting purposes as I prep for things like lighting. I will be displaying this in flight mode, so I can apply the landing gear covers. I'm going to go ahead and cover up the forward landing gear port, and what I'm really doing here is laying out these red pieces on the pegboard so I can get them painted up. These are very easy because I can paint them on one plane. And here I am in my spray booth because people had requested to see the painting process. This is a water curtain spray booth, which is great. I got a lot of real estate for painting, a lot of space, and the water curtain picks up a lot of the extra particles, so it keeps the filter very clean. As for painting these, I'm not as concerned with the tolerance because I'm only doing one side, but it is a black primer coat, a silver intermediate coat, and then in this case a red base coat. And the purpose of this is for the destructive chipping method that I plan on using, which we'll cover later in the video. Because the tolerances are so tight, I'm being very careful with the masking on this A-Wing between the white on the main body and where the red goes. I don't want to have to fight with removing paint to get a proper fit. Once masked, the painting procedure for the fuselage is the same. Black base, silver undercoat, and white base coat, all for the weathering method I have chosen to go with. And it's unconventional, but I think it'll give a good result. The rear bulkhead, which contains what look like auxiliary engines, is pretty straightforward. Plus those two little pipes hoses on either side. Goes together extremely well. There's this two-piece detail part that goes in the cowling. Very straightforward. And then pop that on, and that is basically ready for paint and assembly. The engine assembly is two-part. You have the injector plate that goes inside the nozzle S-foil assembly. That's followed by the injector hoses and the engine cowls, which is a two-piece assembly, which snaps together quite easily. Any repeat viewers will know I do a fair amount of lighting, so a lot of this is going to be reviewed, but that's not actually the point of this section of the build log. Now here I am drilling a 3mm hole in the injector plate to install a 3mm LED. And then, of course, the same things I always do. In this case, I'm using magnet wire. Want to keep it super small. And, cleaning off the ends, pre-tinning, and then pre-tinning the terminals on the LED. This is for better connection once you have solder on either component, a little solder on the tip of your soldering iron, just for better heat transfer, and the two bond very quickly and easily versus fighting with it. And then connecting power to make sure it works, because sometimes your LEDs don't work, and there's nothing worse than finding it out after you've done a whole bunch of work. Point is, the 3mm LED is very, very bright, but the terminals, getting them into this assembly was a little bit more, not challenging, bit of a pain. And I also didn't want them overblown. But here I'm still going through the motions and, checking for where light leaks will be. So, very intense, a little bit tight. I wanted to tone it down, so I opted to stop and reset. I opted to go with the less cumbersome SMD. Now, I'm not sure what number this is, because it's an old one I had in stock, but it's about the same size as a 1206. I have used clear resin to lock these into the injector plates, which is very handy because it gives me a lens and also a very quick and easy mounting solution. And because I generally use white lights only, I use clear paint to get the desired color, in this case, a mix of yellow and orange. And I also painted the plate around the LED and lens, just because I'm not going to be able to access that once it's installed. And then, of course, test. You want to make sure these lights are working every step along the way. Once the injector plate is installed in the clear part, grill if you will, I popped it in and once again did a light test. And now I'm doing light blocking to prevent any light leaks. And I didn't show this earlier, but we're going to give these engine parts a blast of red. Make sure the LED and injectors are installed properly. Test again. Always test. And lay out some pathways for the wires so you don't pinch them and damage them during component installation. But in this case, the routing will be changed slightly once I do some fit testing. As you can see, I'm using a variety of tools. There's the files, there's the knife, and of course a bit on the Dremel to dig a trench. And now we can install the cowls and test again to make sure those wires did not get pinched or damaged. With the lighting and the engines complete, now I need to do some assembly on the fuselage to figure out where everything goes. I've drilled a 3mm hole all the way up through. That's to allow the wires to pass from the engines through the fuselage into the support. And once I've laid that out, I can run the wires out the inner side of the engine cowls, put those back together, and run additional trenching so the wires can pass through without being pinched or damaged when the fuselage halves are clipped together. Luckily, the way this thing is built, I can place the engines in the lower fuselage to see exactly where everything goes. Just another thing about this Bandai kit I really like. And takes a little bit of doing because I partially squeezed the two halves together, then slid the engine in. So there's a little bit of fooling around to do to get things done. Here I am just doing additional detail painting on the various hoses and pipes, because now I can start putting this back together. With all that groundwork laid, now we can really start rocking on this. Everything's wired, everything's trenched. Start running the wires through the fuselage, start assembling the upper and lower halves, so then I can draw the engines in and get them locked into place. Now the fuselage isn't completely clamped down yet because I still need room to get the rear bulkhead in and its cowl. Once that's done, a lot of the assembly is complete. It's supplemental pieces like these side shrouds, which are also torpedo launchers, the lower panel and the patch panel, which I painted a different color, cockpit in, upper red panel, and the nose cone. That's, like I said, that's the bulk of it. There is a panel that goes behind the cockpit, perhaps for maintenance bay or equipment, I'm not sure. Take a good look at everything, and then there is a shroud that goes on that panel between the cockpit glass canopy and the rear panel. This is me in the edit, working away on getting this A-Wing video wrapped up, but I made two decisions during the process, and I wanted to drop them here. One, I will be selling this kit. I'll have the Etsy and eBay listing, if I have it, in the comments, and I'm also going to sell a light kit for it, based on what I made for this, so anyone can take their A-Wing and have all the pieces to do what I did. Anyway, back to the video. One of the things I really like is that the guns, main guns, blasters, whatnot, come as three pieces. You got the main body and attachment to that, then the barrel. Black body, white barrel, red tip. Rather than molding as one piece, so you just get a little bit more detail that's still super easy to assemble and paint. So I guess I'm gushing about this Bandai kit a little bit. With the main portions of painting completed, the white and red for the base coat, it is time to do the gray patch panels. Obviously, this took quite a bit of masking to get done right, but it was absolutely worth it. So we're going to wrap this up, go to the paint booth, hit the gray, and come back with the finished detail painting. This yellow frog tape is actually fantastic. I would say it's as good as Tamiya, because look at these nice, clean, crisp lines. With the assembly basically complete, I have applied a clear coat in preparation for the decals. Now I'm going to gloss over this part, because the decals are a lot of repeat. Or wet the decal, apply it, place a Q-tip or paper towel and apply the microsol. So I hope you enjoy this little musical interlude right in the middle of the video. Well, now that all the hard work is done, it's on to some of the fun stuff, like weathering. I'm using a number of techniques on this. Here I'm doing a pin wash. It is gloss coated, as I did for the decals. I'm still relatively new at it, so I'm having trouble getting the brush loaded well enough to get it to flow, so I'm kind of holding the brush on the surface. But it's giving me the result I want. I'm essentially painting in the lines, so I'm trying to keep it as clean as possible. And on the fins, it's not great. I went a little heavy on the paint, so the recessed lines aren't as well defined. Just a note to remember for next time. Now on the bottom, I'm going a bit heavier, so rather than do a pin wash, I'm doing more of a general wash. And you see much less careful on the panel lines, and much heavier in all the other recessed areas. As for cleaning up, I'm actually just using airbrush cleaner to take that off. Another problem I have, I apologize, I actually did do some general wash on the top. I must not have recorded that footage. Point is, I'm just using airbrush cleaner to clean up the excess that I've got on the hull, or on the fuselage, excuse me. One of the issues I have is impatience and uncertainty. I tend not to let it sit long enough to cure, so I tend to pull a lot out of the recessed areas. This is actually one of my favorite weathering tools, the Tamiya pigments, even though I have been told in my comments that pigments are for amateurs. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you do it as long as you achieve the results you're trying to achieve. Don't let people gatekeep on you. Anyway, the procedure is simple. Just get a little bit on this little makeup brush and just start doing some streaking. And that has worked exceptionally well for me over the years. And you can you can basically modulate it with how much is on the brush, or with how much is on the sponge and how much pressure you apply, how much you stretch it out, a combination of both. I went fairly heavy in the engine bells, just to see if we can get some darker detail there. So I have the least amount of experience with these AK weathering pencils. I've kind of used them a little bit before. This is the first time I really tried them. It was really just a matter of dipping the tip in water to activate it, and I'm kind of using it for more oil and grease. There's not a lot of blast marks on mine, as there are around those panels. I'm using it more to denote a different kind of weathering. So streaking, but minor streaking. So I was able to give that good oily look. I'm also using a little bit of rust, not much rust, because I feel like the A-Wings are kind of new-ish, especially in Return of the Jedi, when we first see them. So I don't want to go too rusty, especially also considering the I believe Star Wars calls it duraluminum is their main fuselage construction material. And once again, I'm using this here to get some oil streaking and some staining, but it was also particularly good for highlighting the ribs on the engine cowls. So they are versatile. I'm hoping to get more out of them and share that as I pick it up. The final weathering technique I'm using on this is chipping, but it's actual chipping. I didn't use chipping fluid. I didn't use a sponge with silver paint on it. This is actual destructive chipping. I'm just using the knife to chip away the surface material. And if you get the depth right, then it reveals the silver undercoat. But sometimes you go a little bit deep and get all the way into the black primer, but that's still okay. When I started this process, I had planned to use the stock base and run wiring through it, which isn't overly complicated, just takes a bit of precision. You can drill through the pin mount and then into the multi-direction adjustable mount, and then remove some material just to make sure you can get the wires through, which still takes a bit of work. But as you can see, it's doable. And then make sure everything's good, figure out where you're going to run your wires, drill some holes, etc. But the thing I realized was that if I use the multi-direction mount, I can only pose it in one pose. And their mount is super ugly. I have limited ability when it comes to 3D design, but simple shapes, squares, rectangles, circles, I can work with. This is an example in Tinkercad of the rod mount insert I created for the Bandai A-Wing base. It is meant for a 3mm rod, so same size as the pin on the factory mount. And the intent is to replace that ugly factory mount with the much more low profile brass rod, which will be painted black. And brass rod is great. I usually cut it with a Dremel, but I didn't want to get all the bits and pieces out, so I'm just using a razor saw here to cut it down, give it a bit of file, and knife the edges because we don't want any burrs that can damage the wiring. So that pops into the fuselage very easily of the A-Wing. I did set the 3D model at 3mm, but it's a bit tight, but not an issue to get that in. Very happy with the fit. So now I can glue in the replacement piece I created, Here I'm removing some of the supports because there's going to be a coin battery and switch to run the electronics on this, because we're only running 3 volts and no resistors. Very, very low voltage. Not a lot of electrical demands. So a CR2032 battery will fit right in that corner with this nice low profile coin battery holder. And here I'm hogging things out so I can get a slightly better fit. As for the switch, I found a micro switch that fits in this raised area. It's just about perfect, which is great because this is a very low profile base. And using the Dremel with this spade bit, I'm getting the initial hole started, open up with a regular drill bit, and then further hog it out to get the switch to fit. And take off any material because burrs can get in the way. And it looks like the switch fits right in there. Clicky clicky. Now I need to remove some material to run wires. So just the Dremel and one of the and the same spade bit is just to basically remove some material so I have a path to follow. The coin battery, I'm just applying negative and positive leads and hot gluing it into place. Pay attention to that last bit of hot glue I applied. It's going to come back and bite me in the butt. Solder the switch terminals and glue the switch in. And once the wires are laid, glue that down. Make sure everything fits. Any eagle-eyed viewers would notice the mistake I made that I'm correcting right now. I actually forgot how to wire a switch. What I should have done was run positive in, positive out, and ground straight to the model, so the switch can actually function properly. Whereas, for some reason, I ran it with a positive and negative. A little bit of a brain fart, but nothing that can't be fixed. But then it seems that the light still doesn't work, so now it's time to get diagnosing. Well, the first thing I need to do is actually make sure the LED works and the battery works. Okay, good. So we know there's a power interrupt somewhere. Well, as it turns out, when I glued the coin battery holder in, I went a little too heavy with the hot glue and actually affected the contacts. So the coin battery wasn't pressing the negative side of the holder. So I took the whole thing out, cleaned it up, re-glued it, and everything is working as it is supposed to. So with all that diagnosing out of the way, and the circuit working properly, now I can actually connect the ship and connect all the wiring. And what I need to do here is sort out the positive and negative wires coming out of the model. So I used 2 LEDs and I didn't separate the wires inside the model. So I got 4 coming out instead of 2. But that's easy enough to sort out because the positive terminals are longer than the negative terminals. But now I need to shorten and strip the wires so everything fits inside this really, really thin base. Luckily, these snippers I have do go down to the right size to strip the insulation off the SMD LED wires. Otherwise, I have to find a different way to strip them, which kind of sucks. But yeah, it's just a matter of getting my negatives and positives all connected together and soldered up. So here I am making my final connections, making sure the lights work, the switch works, the battery works. And then my soldering iron shorted out. I have to be honest, I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy this build going in. Not because it's Bandai, their kits are fantastic, but because the A-Wing just didn't click for me at first. But this build completely changed my mind. Once I started test fitting parts and seeing the ship come together in 3 dimensions, it grabbed me. Sometimes you don't bond with a subject until it's literally in your hands. The fit on this is classic Bandai. Precise, clean, no weird tolerances. But what I really loved was that it's pressure fit, not full snap fit. That meant easy disassembly to test wiring, lighting, all without breaking seams. Regarding lighting, I chose to do just the engines. I couldn't find a solid reference for the studio cockpit lighting, and instead of guessing, I decided to leave it alone. Would you have lit it anyway, even without reference? Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how other builders would approach this choice. I also passed on photoetch. There's nothing wrong with it, but in this case, I just didn't feel the return was worth the cost and effort. The base kit already looks fantastic, and honestly, less work, same impact. I did make one big change though. I replaced the kit stand with a 3mm brass rod. Cleaner look, way easier to run wires through, and it really helped with the final presentation. So yeah, what started out as just another Bandai kit turned into one of the smoothest, most enjoyable builds I've done in a while. Sometimes the subject isn't what pulls you in, it's the build itself. If you made it this far, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this Bandai 172 A-Wing as much as I enjoyed building it. Model building is all about the journey. Every kit presents its own challenges, but each one is an opportunity to expand your skills and create something one of a kind. So keep creating, enjoy the process, and remember, it's not about perfection. It's about pushing your craft forward, one build at a time. Now, if you got value from this or my other videos and want to support what I do here on the channel, please consider buying me a coffee or joining my Patreon. Those links are in the description.